Hello, and welcome to the Mobile User Acquisition Show, a podcast to help you unlock tremendous growth for your app. My name is Shamant Rao. I'm the CEO of the boutique growth marketing firm Rocketship HQ and host of the podcast Mobile User Acquisition Show. In each episode, we feature experts in the field of mobile growth and discuss strategies, tips, and pointers from the leading edge of mobile growth marketing. By the end of each episode, you will have gained actionable and tactical insights that will help you make more informed decisions in your own work around growth. The Mobile User Acquisition Show is produced by Meryl Vincent, Content Marketing Manager at Rocketship HQ.
Our guest today is Anton Bernstein, CEO and co-founder at Pocket Worlds. In today's episode, Anton shares insights on the evolution of virtual worlds, the power of user-generated content, and how HighRise is empowering creators to build immersive social experiences. Anton also dives into the unique monetization strategies behind HighRise, including cosmetics and creator-driven game economies, and discusses the balance between long-term community building and early monetization. I'm truly excited to share a deep dive into what is a very unique and interesting model of social communities and games. I'm excited to welcome Anton Bernstein to the Mobile User Acquisition Show. Anton, followed your work, admired your work for a very long time, so I'm very thrilled and excited to have you on the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shamant. Excited to be here.
Excellent. Can you start by sharing a bit about your background and what inspired you to explore the concept of virtual worlds and creator-driven platforms?
I guess it goes back to so I moved from Russia to the United States when I was 5 years old. My family did. The Soviet Union had just collapsed and the wall came down and we moved basically as soon as we could. And so I grew up without much, because when you move from the Soviet Union, you own nothing. But my dad was really into computers. And so we always had a computer at home. So I was always on the computer playing around, especially playing games, socializing, connecting with other people, building games too, modding, things like StarCraft. And so a lot of my childhood was kind of connecting with people through the building of games and through the playing of games. Then when I graduated high school, I thought I wanted to start a business. So I went to business school, which is not the place where you start businesses. Apparently, it's the place where you learn to do finance or consulting. And so I kind of took a detour, went into venture capital for a while, where I still actually focused on gaming. I worked on the Kabam deal at Redpoint and a couple of other deals at Insight that were gaming related, both on the kind of growth equity side. And then I took a further detour, started an e-commerce company in Australia and France. LuxuryEscapes.com in Australia is one of the largest e-commerce companies. In Australia, we sell travel packages to people traveling from Australia to Southeast Asia. And there, I would say I learned a lot about consumer behavior, direct-to-consumer selling, marketing, but it was still kind of detached from what I was really excited about, which was virtual worlds, game environments, how people can connect with each other. And so we had this French satellite. When we sold it, I moved to San Francisco, got together with another friend who also loves gaming named Jimmy, who's my co-founder and CTO. And we started to essentially explore, and we had the luxury to be able to do this because of the prior exit, to explore what was at the intersection of social networking and gaming. And so we spent about 5 years bootstrapped, just experimenting and iterating, saying, hey, you have this mobile device, which is your identity device. This was in 2013 is when we got started. So you have this identity device in mobile. It's increasingly becoming a pretty dominant gaming platform. What kind of products or games make sense to be able to connect people to each other through them? And so we were kind of busy building very, very social gameplay. I guess traditionally some people might call it MMOs, massively multiplayer online worlds. And so we built one called Pockets. We built like a farming MMO called Harvest Crossing, learned a lot, failed a lot. Neither of those products worked very well. And then we launched HighRise in 2016. And HighRise, when we first launched it, was essentially kind of like a shell within which people can express their identity, connect with each other, and hang out in virtual space. And on that shell, we kind of kept iterating for many years. And especially in the first 2-3 years, we were still a very small team of 4 or 5 people shipping every week and basically testing, hey, how do we connect people with each other? What are the social features that make sense in HighRise? And then also, what are the experiences or gameplay elements that help people connect with each other and that are also engaging and fun? And then as we kind of continued over time, we realized that honestly, our community knows better than we do what experiences and what content really resonates. And so we built more and more user-generated content tooling, more and more creator tooling, to the point where actually this year in public beta, we launched HighRise Studio, which is our full development environment where someone can come in and build any game or any experience. They can code. They actually use a kind of Unity as the shell, but then they use our APIs and our technologies and our plugins to be able to build whatever they want and deploy it with one click into HighRise. They get a bunch of data, retention data, engagement data. They're able to monetize their games and experiences through a payments API, as well as through subscriber engagement payouts. And so, yeah, we've kind of taken it to the very extreme, this realization that our community knows best what our community wants by giving these very feature-rich creator tools to our community. And so today, we've had over 45 million registered users on the platform. It's been growing pretty well. People really, I would say, connect with each other. I do 2 to 3 user interviews every week, and I always ask, why do you stay with HighRise? And literally every single person says because of the friends or the people I met on HighRise. So it's very, very deeply social while also being pretty interactive. So it's kind of a long background.
Very cool, very interesting. And, life's long and winding. So it's always interesting to hear what the backstory is behind something that may look very obvious to everybody. And HighRise takes a very unique approach to user-generated content. Can you elaborate and describe this for folks that may not be familiar with it?
Yeah, so there's it's a little more, but let's say there's kind of like 2 tracks to user-generated content. One track is the virtual content like skins. So it's clothing, it's environment assets, like any basically asset, 2D or 3D, that you can release inside of HighRise. So that's kind of one track. And then the other track is the experiences in the games. And those are built often using code. So on that first track, in terms of virtual goods and content, there I would say we're probably the most unique or most different if you compare us to our peers like Roblox or Epic. We have 2 different modes. So one is called HighRise Concepts. Basically, it's a contest that happens on very frequent cadence. People submit ideas, like ideas on the back of a napkin. They'll submit ideas to this contest. Our community will vote within the contest. And then depending on what wins, our artists will actually then come in and produce that concept into a finished product that gets released into HighRise and then sold. And the creator earns a commission. That's one way. Another way, we have HighRise Ideas, which is essentially a Kickstarter for sketches, essentially. So somebody submits an idea to HighRise Ideas, people can pre-order it. And if it gets enough pre-orders, then again, our artists will come in and actually produce the item, the piece of content, and deploy it into HighRise. And again, the HighRise Ideas idea creator will earn a commission. And it's pretty different from other platforms like, say, Roblox or Epic, where you have to do everything from start to finish. You have to come up with the idea, then you have to model it, then you have to rig it, and then you can kind of ship it. For us, the kind of requirement or the skill requirement to actually put together an idea that ends up getting produced into the app is much, much lower as a result of the service that we provide. So that's there. On the other end, there's games and experiences. And for games and experiences, we have HighRise Studio, where anyone can build any game or any experience. And that's a combination of using Unity UI plus Lua scripting. We also have an API. We call it a bots API, kind of similar to Discord bots. So you can write your own bot, you can host it on your own server, and it can communicate with rooms and environments inside of HighRise so that you can kind of, you can manage gameplay, you can manage user rights, you can do all sorts of stuff through the bots API. So those are kind of two areas where people build experiences in games.
Very cool, very cool. And I imagine it's can be kind of crazy and very satisfying for them to see what they made and built to be actually reflected in the game experience itself. And I think, as you perhaps briefly said, that is perhaps what brings them, that one of the draws of HighRise for a lot of users. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And we have, in terms of designers, we have north of 10,000. In terms of experience
Right.
developers, we have north of 3,000. So
Right.
it's a growing
Right.
number. Yeah, it's growing fairly
Sure.
quickly. And
Sure.
also for me, it's so exciting to see people actually get their items realized or be able to build games and experiences. A lot of our users, this is their first time coding, and they're actually learning it in the process of trying to build something for themselves and for their friends.
Sure. Sure. And I can imagine that, just from my own experience, as a non-coder who started coding after ChatGPT, and I've experienced and sensed what that feels like, so I can imagine what that can be like. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And I know you mentioned that one of the things you heard from during user interviews was really that users want to use HighRise for the social connections. So what, if any, might be important product decisions that make some of these social connections happen or accelerate them or make them more likely?
The way I think about this kind of evolution of virtual worlds is, first you had, of the really, really big ones, you had Minecraft. And Minecraft basically has no social layer built into the game. Increasingly, it does now that it's owned by Microsoft, and they're kind of trying to compete a little bit more directly with the Roblox. But you basically have to host your own private server. The social aspect of Minecraft was essentially outsourced to YouTube and Discord. Then kind of the next layer after that came Roblox, where Roblox actually built a social layer, but the social layer, I would say, is still pretty thin. Part of it is because it's for very young children, and so it kind of has to be thin. Part of it is just the way that it was architected and designed. They're still very, very much focused on like the physics-based gameplay. And then there's a kind of a light social layer around it. For us, we always started with the social first. And so that part is deeply embedded. We have a full-featured messenger, kind of like Facebook Messenger. We have a full-featured newsfeed, kind of like Instagram. We have a full-featured voice, lots of different voice. You can do calls inside the app. You can use voice inside of the worlds. We have proximity chat. We also have broadcasting chat. And so there's all these kind of ways that people can make a connection, socialize, just purely functionally. And then in terms of like the gameplay or the kind of interactivity, first of all, a lot of it is hangout spaces. And this is heavily UGC. So a lot of our users create hangout spaces in order to hang out.
Right.
And in order to interact with each other. The other thing that we're increasingly thinking about is, well, how do we actually introduce gameplay that facilitates people making connections? So, think like cooperative gameplay where you have to work together in order to accomplish something, or think party games like a Jackbox party games, or like a game of werewolves or Mafia. These kind of gameplay elements that, or Among Us, that blew up during COVID. This kind of gameplay that really helps and facilitates with making a connection, because I strongly believe that most friendship occurs through shared context and shared goals. Probably most of the friends that you've made have been through work or through college or through some sort of hobby, or maybe a sport. Maybe you picked up, I don't know, pickleball these days. Everybody plays it. So yeah, it's kind of the same, but in virtual space is what we kind of work on.
And it certainly can be very surprising, at least to me, because I spent part of my childhood in the analog world and part of it in the digital world. So part of it still astonishes me and surprises me, and I can imagine that. Right. Can you talk? And obviously, folks come for social connection. Folks come for self-expression. Can you talk to us about HighRise's monetization strategy, particularly around cosmetics and in-game purchases?
Historically, our monetization, and still now-ish, it's mostly cosmetic. So it's, you establish yourself in this world, you care about the way you present in this world, you care about your relationships in this world. And as a result, you care about your cosmetics, you care about how you look, how you present, the things you own, they matter. And the analogy is just like real life. Just like in real life, because I care about real life and
Yeah.
how I present myself in real life, I care to buy certain brands. I care about the clothing I wear. I care about, how I present myself and how people think of me and what stuff I own. It's the same in HighRise. Once you're really like kind of bought into the world and you have friends in the world and you care about the way that you present yourself, it kind of translates the same way. And so cosmetics end up being important. And again, we end up selling it through a combination of UGC, through HighRise concepts and HighRise ideas. We also make our own content that we sell and release. We also run events every week. So every week we have a kind of mini game that people can play that, if you win, you end up winning some top tier cosmetics. So cosmetics are very important. That's where we make, the vast majority of our revenue. But increasingly, as UGC becomes more of a thing, as studio becomes more of a thing, we are kind of increasing the split of revenue that also comes from experiences and games. So there, think more like consumables, power-ups, level ups, feature unlocks, like that kind of thing. But our creators make that. We don't make that. So our creators make that and payments API to charge for it. And if you look at a Roblox, for Roblox, 15% of their revenue, 1.5, comes from their cosmetics marketplace, and 85% comes from in-experience revenue, like revenue inside the worlds and games. And so for us, that's still pretty early because it's an early kind of component of what we do, but I'd imagine that's split to change pretty dramatically over time.
Yeah, that's crazy. I can imagine the community matures as the world matures. I imagine that's going to be more of a shift. Speaking of monetization, HighRise has relied on paid acquisition, again, which tends to, skew a lot of games and apps towards early monetization, which would be D1, D7. So have there been product decisions that try to balance D1, D7 monetization versus enabling social connections? Do, do you feel those are necessarily contradicting each other as forces, or is it not quite so much?
Yeah, to be honest, that's always been a bit of a tricky thing for us. We were bootstrapped for 5 years. And so because we were bootstrapped, we always needed to drive return on ad spend. We always needed to drive LTV. We couldn't just kind of like, use venture dollars to fund it. We did end up raising funding. We've raised $10 million in our lifetime. We actually haven't spent any of it because we've been profitable. It's kind of the bootstrap roots. And so the result has been that, yes, there's kind of always been a bit of a tension between monetization and thinking way more long-term, thinking more about the connections that people can form. I would say today, we're in a place where, we're in this privileged place where we have a fairly large community, we're doing pretty well. And so we are much more focused on early retention and early connection between people. At the same time, I'll say that there's like a massive correlation between someone seeing enough value to spend a dollar and retaining. They're just very highly correlated. For someone to kind of hang out and never spend anything means they haven't seen enough value to be able to, take out $1 from their pocketbook, which means that we're probably not offering all that much value. And so there is a kind of correlation where if somebody makes a purchase, converts, that means that they've seen enough value to retain. And so, yeah, I wouldn't say that, although they can be at odds if it's done in a way that feels kind of painful, that feels in a way where it's like it turns off the user because they're burned out or because it's just too much. There is also a component too where they reinforce each other. So we're kind of trying to balance the two today. But I will say historically, we've probably leaned more heavily into monetization than we would have if we weren't, basically fighting to survive.
For sure. And I can imagine, and I've certainly seen that in a number of other apps, not necessarily comparable, but I've certainly seen that a lot more bootstrapped apps tend to want to monetize more aggressively because it can become an existential question if you're not doing that, right? So certainly I can imagine and I understand that.
Totally.
Yeah. But I think it's also interesting to hear that once you sort of get some of the directions right, there doesn't have to be attention, right? Because the premium stuff is what your most engaged users really want and are happy to pay for. And I think that's very instructive to see as well.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a reflection of are you delivering enough value that someone will part
Sure.
with a dollar? Like if they won't even part with a
Sure.
dollar, really delivering enough value.
Sure, for sure. And you also mentioned and talked about the concept of the creator flywheel. Can you explain this conceptually and how this influences the user experience, and also just the metrics you look at day to day within HighRise?
Sure. Yeah. So the creator flywheel is essentially a kind of a mantra inside our company in Pocket Worlds. We talk about it every day, definitely every month, at every town hall and all hands meeting. And the creator flywheel is a pretty simple concept. It's this wheel where users enter HighRise and become HighRise kind of members, community members. Some of those users become creators. Those creators build games and experiences that engage and attract users who become creators, who build games and experiences that attract and engage users, and so on. And that's this kind of network effect flywheel that we are very focused on reinforcing. And there's lots of places in that wheel, all the nodes and all the edges along that wheel where we can influence how fast that wheel spins. So,
Sure.
for example, users joining HighRise, running user acquisition or product-led growth or any way that we can grow the product to get more users at the top of the funnel, users turning into creators, that is, we run game jams every month. It's great documentation. It's YouTube videos and tutorials. It's engaging with our users every day in our app and inside of Discord and encouraging them to build experiences, build content. It's payments, paying people for building those experiences. All that kind of stuff is all the conversion of user to creator. And then, creator to experience is, what tooling do we have? How good is HighRise Studio? Is it easy to pick up and use?
Yeah.
Are they able to build really sophisticated and rich stuff? Like if you wanted to build Animal Crossing in HighRise, could you do it? Which, by the way, you can. And then experiences to users is, on the one hand, how do you share experiences out? How do people discover those experiences if they're not HighRise members? And then also how do those users interact with the experiences? So because we have a rich social fabric inside of HighRise, if you build an experience, people can follow it. You can post updates to it. You can attract people back to your experience if you post something new, all that kind of stuff. So this is a big circle where we can influence it in lots of different ways. And essentially that's the whole intent of our company is how do we influence this circle?
For sure. Yeah. How do you reduce that friction for any creator that's coming in and going through that flywheel? Right? Yeah. And Anton, when you talked about the cosmetics and some of the in-game purchases, right? So I was reminded of what you guys did a few years ago with NFTs. And I'm curious if you can share if there were any learnings from NFTs and how they may have impacted and influenced what you guys are doing with cosmetics now.
I still like the concept of NFTs. I like this idea of ownership that's decentralized, that you can't, suddenly delete your stuff or anything like that. I do like the core idea. I think the technology, unfortunately, is just challenged from a UX perspective, and a regulatory perspective. So it's just kind of a challenging thing to work with. It does end up, I think kind of the the speculative nature of it and the speculative game really, it took it to these great heights, but it was also pretty dark. And at the same time, the tech just wasn't really there. We actually spent a bunch of time. We built our own subnet on Avalanche, which is a blockchain. We were considering launching our currency on there, hosting a lot of the kind of NFT data, that kind of thing. So we got really deep into the weeds. And after maybe 9 months of working on it, we realized the UX it's not there. It's not mass market. It's going to be very difficult for anyone who's not already in kind of the crypto space to adopt it.
Yeah.
And so we decided to punt on it. However, we do still have an NFT community, and we still have, one NFT collection called the HighRise Creature Club, another one called HighRise Land. And actually, both of those communities are super engaged. And what we found was when we first launched it, we got a bunch of speculators, people who don't know about HighRise, don't necessarily care about HighRise. They're more about speculating on assets. And as the years went on, this was like a few years ago now, as the years went on, those NFTs actually changed hands to our community members. And now all of those NFTs essentially are owned by our community members. And we give them perks, and we give them certain kind of like items in the game if you're a member of this community. And so actually that's been really, really strong. And I would say the biggest learning there is, hey, you can use virtual goods and virtual assets to create communities, to create, subcultures inside of worlds. And that is what HighRise Creature Club is. That is what HighRise Land is. And we've also been exploring with doing it with our items that are off-chain, right? Items that are in our database. You have a very rare pet. Now you're a member of this community, and this community has its own kind of privileges and perks, and also, status, and can talk to each other in this way. So yeah, I continue to believe it's interesting. I think the decentralized nature of the tech is interesting. I just think it still has really intense UX challenges. Maybe if Apple introduced a wallet built into the phone, that would be a big game changer, but I don't know when or if they would do that.
Yeah. Interesting though, because the way you described how the Creature Club was and is, that was the original vision for all of NFTs until the speculative mania took over, right? And it's crazy. I was just reading more of a recent history of the crazy years of crypto, and in theory, NFTs were supposed to build a lot of communities in the way that you just described, except, of course, all of the speculative mania happened and everything crashed and burned. But it looks like the original promise still remains, and it sounds like the community, the users of HighRise, still believe in the community value of the NFTs. Yeah. Right.
Yes, I just think the reality is it doesn't matter if they're NFTs.
Right.
Like them being NFTs is kind of orthogonal. We learned a lot through the process because they were NFTs, and we did build a community out of it. But they just as well could be items in our database because it's still kind of a segmentation of the community in that way. So yes, and I think I think it's more about the community building. It's also more about having something beyond an NFT, right? Like yes, the virtual good is important, but you need the context for the virtual good. And the problem with all of these NFT communities that emerged was that there was no universe. Like there was nothing to use it in, really. And they've tried, the Bored Apes are still, I think, making their world or whatever, and they have infinite money, but kind of tough to start there, I would say.
Yeah. Anton, this has been incredibly in-depth and active. Yeah. And certainly it's fascinating to go behind the scenes of everything you guys have been building at HighRise. This is perhaps a good place for us to wrap up and carry on, because I want to be respectful of your time and schedule. But before we do that, can you tell folks how they can find out more about you, everything you guys do?
So they can find out about our company. It's called Pocket Worlds at pocketworlds.com. Also HighRise.game. We're on desktop and mobile. Most of our users are on mobile, but desktop is increasingly becoming a more important client. If you wanted to check out HighRise Studio, then go to create.highrise.game, and you can see all of our kind of suite of tools. And find me on Twitter, Anton Bernstein. Feel free to reach out if you want to create anything in HighRise or curious about anything. And yeah, thank you so much.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show. And we will link to all of the links that you mentioned in the show notes. So we'll make sure to do that. Excellent. Thank you again. It was a pleasure and honor. Thank you for being on the show.
Likewise. Thank you.
For more tips, pointers, and strategies from the leading edge of mobile user acquisition, subscribe to our YouTube channel right here, or check out our blog, rocketship.hq.com/blog.